Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who are thinking about upgrading their home security system with some lions. Each week we spin the wheel and land on a new genre. Spies, mysteries, horror, romance, SF, it's all on the shelf. And right now we are reading fantasy. This time, Robert E. Howard's The Tower of the Elephant. I'm Zach, and this week I'm actually really interested in how I feel like the formula has changed for Conan in this story in particular, and maybe what it might mean for us moving forward.
That's very interesting. I'm Bob. I'm interested in, I guess, friendship or what kind of feels like I guess, Conan's relationships. I'm interested in how he makes relationships with people in this one. This is such a cool story. I know we've talked about Conan a little bit now, and I've kind of overdone it on the wow, that's great. But I think this is so cool. There's so many interesting turns where someone else, another fantasy writer, might just write a straightforward story, but there are so many kind of interesting, weird sidesteps that Howard pursues and yet still stays laser focused on the plot. So it's really entertaining. In this story, Conan, he's just kind of wandering through town. He overhears someone talking about the Tower of the Elephant and the elephant's heart. And he says, "Oh, tell me more about the elephant's heart. How do I go there?" And he points at this huge tower. This it's described like this: the shimmering shaft of the tower rose frostily in the stars. In the sunlight, it shone so dazzlingly that few could bear its glare, and men said it was built of silver. So very cool. And he says, "Oh, I could totally climb that." This extremely tall tower. He gets into a bar fight, kills a man, but then he goes to the tower and he makes fast friends with Taurus, who is called the Prince of Thieves. He is a famous thief, and they just decide, spur of the moment, we could kill each other, but we maybe don't know who would win. Instead, let's buddy up, and they go and try to steal the elephant's the heart of the elephant, which is a really rare gemstone worth, the whole town, price of the whole town. Sorry. Then what happens, Zach?
Well, they kill some lions. uh, it was actually quite a bit of a slaughter. Yeah, the temple is using lions as their home security system, which is a fantastic use of, or rather, upgrade to the classic guard dog. Then they go in a different room, and there's a giant spider, which kills Taurus. But Conan gets the best of it. He meets Yag Kosha, the well, what is he? That's maybe a question we could talk about. Yakosha tells him, "Cut into my chest and take my heart," where there's a jewel. Conan takes it and uses it not so much to kill Yara, but rather allows Yara's own greed to be the trap into which he falls, if that makes sense. Um, I think that maybe there's a conversation to be had here about how Yara's end plays into the Conan character, being that Conan has a reputation for just being a hack and slash kind of a character. He's leading. He's in a wedge shape on the battlefield, and he's just cutting everyone in front of him. But here, you have a wizard type of person, thing, guy, and Conan doesn't cut him open. He puts a jewel in front of him, and the jewel kind of sucks him in and shrinks the wizard down into nothing. And yeah, I think that's about it. I think that's what happened.
That's about what happened. The one thing, Zach, it's not the stone is not in the heart. He takes the heart out, squeezes it like an orange, which I thought was a great image
Oh yeah,
onto the jewel.
you're right. You're
And
right.
you know what? It reminded me a lot of every time I forget the name of that wonderful movie that your brother had us watch.
Zardoz.
The yes. The gun is good, the penis is evil, Zardoz.
Yeah.
Because people are being trapped in that jewel. But yes, so he gets Yara out. This creature is so interesting, and again, another connection with Lovecraft, because I think this now is the evidence, or I guess there's plenty of evidence. This is one example where a eldritch god, because this thing calls himself an elder from space, and he says, I flew here with other people, and I've been here for ages and ages and ages. I'm a very old creature. it seems like it might be kind of an eldritch god like Lovecraft and how he's participating in the Lovecraft universe. But it does seem very different. You said earlier you were interested in how this changes the formula for Conan. What do you think of this story as a different formula for the Conan the Barbarian we know?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think thinking back to, well, gosh, 3, 4 years ago when we read Phoenix and the Sword, but also thinking much more recently to when we read The Scarlet Citadel, what you have is really wide ranging stories, stories that are geographically diverse, but also have a kind of unhingedness in what kind of creatures
Mm.
and monsters they give, if that makes sense. Um, there almost seems to be no rhyme or reason to what Howard is going to show you in these older stories. But this, to me, feels like a much more self contained story. Uh, it's just Conan learning about something, saying, I'm going to go steal that thing, passing through a few booby traps and tests in order to get that thing. And then, well, he doesn't even keep it. Then it's just the end of the story. To me, this feels like something that would have been an anecdote in the previous stories. Conan remembered back to his time defeating Yara the wizard and in the Tower of the Elephant, and then moving on. But it feels like here Howard took an anecdote and really ballooned it out into a very crisp story.
It is a very crisp story. I think something similar too. There's, again, I said there's kind of a pivot here. When he meets Taurus, it could have been just that, oh, here's another obstacle Conan has to overcome. And it seems almost a spur of the moment decision where Howard says, you know what? No, they're going to work together. I think that's interesting here too, where Howard is kind of being maybe flexible or at least doing surprising things in an otherwise straightforward, crisp story. But it was interesting to me too, because I don't think we've seen like earlier when he meets Peleus in the Scarlet Citadel, they become allies, but I don't know if they're really friends. Maybe Conan and Taurus aren't really friends here either, but they're working together in a way like they're old friends. When I think of Conan, I think of someone extremely independent who needs no one. And I wonder if we'll see in future stories, does he make friends with people? Does he need other people? He is so anti society, anti civilization that it seems like friendship would also be kind of anathema to Conan. But he's so friendly. He's a fun guy.
Well, that's a really good question. I think it's like a question of, does he need friends? No, because what need would imply is that Conan is at a state of
Mm.
disadvantage. You know what I mean? Like, Conan can't make it on his own. He needs his friends in order to make it through these challenges. I don't think that's I don't think that would fit with Conan's character. However, the question of, does Conan do friendship? Certainly. I think that I think that if Conan didn't do friendship, then you wouldn't get the kind of gosh, I'm going to sound you sound like a business podcast, but like the leadership styles that Conan shows. Conan is not a ruler through fear. He's not a ruler at sword point. It's not that everyone in his cities that he controls is worried that if they don't do what he says, he's going to lop their head off. No, there's a sense of allegiance that I think people feel with Conan, and I think that allegiance and friendship really go hand in hand. Maybe not in every scenario, but certainly in many scenarios, if you have a friend, you know, you feel some sort of loyalty to them. So, in that sense, I feel like Howard has really captured the spirit of his character by allying him with this Prince of Thieves, by saying, "I will trust you. We will work together for this moment, but I won't turn my back to you, and I'm not your underling. Two mutual a cohort of people who are equals working towards a common task."
That is very interesting, especially when you said that he doesn't need friends. It makes me think of the gods in these stories. Earlier, we saw, when we talked about the Hyborian Age, we talked about Mitra, the god Mitra, who is almost a Christian god. And I believe people pray to Mitra. But Crom, who Conan, follows, the Sumerians and the I guess just the Sumerians and the Aquilonians follow Crom. Maybe more people do too. But you don't pray to Crom. If you pray to Crom, you're weak. You don't pray. You don't ask for things. Crom has given you everything you need, and you're supposed to take care of it on your own. So you can't need anything. But you're right. People follow Conan in the Scarlet Citadel. I think he has 5,000 people following him against an army of, what was it, 25,000, 30,000, and they're all
Yeah.
willing to follow Conan because they trust him. So he is an inspiring leader. But I wonder if there's a problem not needing people. That's an appeal, I think, in Lord of the Rings, is all of the characters working together. The Fellowship, each person needs the other in the Fellowship. And
Hmm.
that's something I think important for us.
Well, I think that in the Fellowship, what we're asked to do with each of the characters is to fundamentally not identify with them, but really recognize them as people in the sense that, like, I recognize the temptation that Frodo Baggins feels towards that ring and ultimately him succumbing to that temptation at the very, very end. Or I recognize the loyalty that Sam Gamgee feels to, his friends. Or I recognize the mischief of the two other hobbits. I could go on and on, but Tolkien wants us to recognize and
Hmm.
empathize with these characters. I think that Howard isn't really concerned with empathy or recognition. I think Howard is concerned with creating idols, if that makes sense, like creating um, kind of the ideal version of a kind of self, maybe like what Freud would call like the ego ideal, in the sense that it's like if you could
Hmm.
live the perfect life, the fantasy of what if all of your desires were granted to you, if you could have whatever you wanted, what would it look like? And that would be for him, and I think what he wants for his readers to feel is that would be Conan the Barbarian.
Hmm. That's a very, yeah, it is. I would love to be Conan. That'd be great. Um, I think another interesting character in the Fellowship is Boromir, someone who needs to be forgiven. He does something terrible and he has to be forgiven by others. I think Conan never needs to be forgiven. It's not just that he's invulnerable or that he's the ultimate man. There's something that is just outside of human relationships. When at the beginning of this story, we talked about this too. He just kills the guy he gets in an argument with.
Yeah.
They're at the bar. Conan overhears him talking about the elephant's heart, and he insults him. So Conan just in this skirmish, like they turns into a bar fight. So Conan just kills him, and gets out of there because he insulted him.
Yeah.
And then the elephant god kind of confronts him about that. He says, I know you've killed. And Conan just says, yeah. But
Sure have. Yep.
I don't know. Do you
But
think there's sure have?
yeah. There's no sense of guilt, right? Like the only
Hmm.
human emotion that seems to be foreign to Conan is guilt. I mean, I guess you could say, like, we haven't really seen an example of Conan and erotic love. I don't know. We got a lot of Conan
Yeah,
stories
not
ahead of
yet.
us, but but like
Hmm.
I think the actual emotion that Howard probably consciously or unconsciously did not write into Conan is guilt. And it's interesting what you said, how that elephant creature, Yag Kosha, who I'm not convinced yet is a god. I do think he is a kind of like alien
Yeah.
intrusion. Uh, you know,
An alien. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, which in itself is probably worth discussing just because of what it means for the Conan mythos. But bracket that, put that aside. Uh, his his speech to Conan, those words he brought up, are interesting because they are a kind of alien ethics, alien morals. And I don't mean like extraterrestrial alien, I just mean we're so steeped in Conan's morality that to get another kind of morality breaking into the text is so wild, I think. And it really kind of like shatters
Hmm.
it's a wake up call. Splash of cold water in the face.
Splash of cool water on the face. It's a similar morality to what Peleus was dealing with too, because here I can't say his name, but the elephant god alien has been trapped by a sorcerer, just like Peleus was trapped by a rival sorcerer, and they've been tortured for years and years and years. I think the elephant god is like 300 years now. He's been being tortured, and then Peleus was for 10 years. So these terrible things happening to these extremely powerful creatures, and Conan immediately knows who's on the right side and who's on the bad side, so he helps. So he understands that morality. It's not exactly an alien morality, but he does look at him and he says, "I know that you killed a lion, you killed a guy at the bar. I'm just not sure how to take that."
Yeah.
But yes, maybe not a god, as far as I know, and this is probably wrong, but for Lovecraft, things like Cthulhu and I think his mother, they flew from another planet into our planet many years ago. And they're huge. So they have to be kind of contained within mountains, contained under the ocean. But I think they're also not
Yeah.
gods. They're just gigantic, powerful aliens.
Right. Well, I guess here's really where I draw the distinctive line is that with gods, regardless of what word we apply to them, god or alien being or whatever, with gods, I think the idea is that you are their powers are so great as there's no real possibility of like communication or negotiation or uh, control with a god. The god does what the god will, and that kind of comes from like a tradition of like maybe Ovid's Metamorphosis, where the gods are coming down and just ruining lives for humans everywhere. But that relationship between human and god carries on into Lovecraft, where it's like, oh, you have these Cthulhu gods, where it's just like you have no human control over their actions. There's nothing you can do to stop the will of these godlike entities. Now, contrast that with the being we get here, who says that, he seems to be a very terrestrial being. I don't mean earthly, but I mean he
Hmm.
seems to be made of flesh and blood. And he has strange powers, he has magical powers, and yet there's a sense in which he can also be controlled and communicated with and negotiated with. He's been under lock and key by a human wizard for 300 years. So, if you were to call him a god, he would surely be the weakest god you've ever heard of. So I guess that's kind of how I would distinguish in my own mind between something like, a highly strange or advanced alien versus a god.
There's some things in this story that I think really make it exciting, and it's details that are anecdotes that explain details about something that make it really, really special. So it's, everything is always the coolest thing ever, and then something's a little bit even better. For example, the Torah says he uses this poison that just knocks, kills these 6 guards. They're out like a light. And then Conan says, "How did you do that? What kind of magic did you use?" And he says, "The obtaining of it was a feat which is, in itself was enough to make me famous among the thieves of the world. I stole it out of a caravan bound for Stygia, and I lifted it in its cloth of gold bag out of the coils of a great serpent, which guarded it without waking him." So there's these incredible backstories to just, a little bit of poison. It's the same thing with the
Yeah.
rope, where he steals, I think he goes and he gets the rope from, what is it, 6 dead women, which I took from their tombs at midnight and steeped in the deadly wine of the Upas tree to give it strength for some rope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool.
Extremely cool. Yeah. Honestly, I feel like if someone were to ask me like what does good writing look like, I want to hand them this, but
Yeah.
for some reason I can't get over the fact that not all good writing looks like this, but I don't know what it is. Like, this just works in a really good way.
Hmm.
I'm actually really interested in reading moving forward, like Robert E. Howard's like boxing stories, his kind of like
Hmm.
sports stuff, just because I'm really curious to see how he writes what a story set in the real world will do to his prose stylings. You know what I mean? Like, will he pull
Hmm.
these tricks in the real world? And that's something that we probably won't tackle for many many moons to come. But a boy can dream.
I was thinking of something similar about Howard being a boxer and did some weightlifting to train for boxing too, but to be really athletic and a really big guy, and purposely so, he would exercise all the time, write for 12 hours a day and then exercise. And I was thinking, wow, writers who are also bodybuilders are super cool. And I started thinking about all the writers who are bodybuilders, and I started to think, oh no, That's a dangerous combination. You have Howard, Mishima, Hemingway. I don't think Harry Cruz had an okay end, but those are the four I could think of. And yeah, maybe it's too much to be both. Maybe it's a little too much pressure on a soul.
Nonsense. Nonsense. More writers should be bodybuilders.
Yes, just take good care of yourself. Yes.
Well, as we continue on through the fantasy novels we're doing, I'm going to be really shocked if we get a prose stylist that I like as much as Robert E. Howard. So I'm trying to just savor this moment while we have it. Talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later, Zach.